So imagine for a minute a bell curve. And there's a company on one end of that bell curve that's really struggling. So they hire a bunch of experts that come in, consultants, they patch it up. It's now squarely under the middle of that bell curve. But what about that little fraction of companies that's way up on the end of the bell curve? Those ones that are just doing an amazing good job. Their employees are highly engaged, super motivated, and their customers go there every time. Those things that got that little company dusted off and into the middle of that bell curve will not get you to the other end of that bell curve.
The Connecticut chapter of Conscious Capitalism invites you to join a new Conscious Leaders Network with presentations geared towards building fluency in applying the movement's core tenets. Starting up October 19th, the group will meet monthly on every third Tuesday to dive into what conscious capitalism looks like in practice and how to make it work for you and your company. Get rejuvenated in your business leadership so you can accomplish more and build your legacy.
Thanks, Ali, for putting that together. So that's just a bit of a teaser. I'll put the registration links in the chat, but I just want to take this opportunity today to share the good news, because it's a very exciting opportunity for everyone in this community to become skilled in the tools of being a more conscious capitalist. So I might take this opportunity to introduce Heather. She's our vice chair and our host of today's session, and kick it off. So thanks, Heather, for leading.
Wonderful, Glenn. Thank you so much. And thank you, special thanks to Ali and Gavin and Eleanor and Lindy Lee and Paul and all the members of our board that are joining us here today. Conscious capitalism, what are we doing here and what's it all about? Basically, at the center is conscious business. And if you can view the emblem of conscious capitalism as a beautiful flower with purpose, stakeholder, culture, and leadership all coming together to create conscious business. And that's what Conscious Capitalism Connecticut chapter is all about. And this series right here, we gather monthly for our youth mentors. And I'm excited for this show to really dive into arts and culture. And we're here joined with two amazing individuals who are representing New Haven's Department of Arts, Culture, Tourism, and Connecticut Office of the Arts. So please join me in welcoming Adriane Jefferson and Kolton Harris. Adriane Jefferson, Director of Cultural Affairs for the City of New Haven. Adriane specializes in professional development programming for young creative professionals, programs that amplifying Black, Indigenous, people of color, and social change initiatives. And she's a thought leader, advisor, and educator pertaining to issues of justice, diversity, equality, access, and inclusion. And she's really dedicated her career to creating programs that result in a more equitable, vibrant, and sustainable arts landscape. Joining her and joining us as well is Kolton Harris, Program Associate, hi Kolton, and Connecticut Office of the Arts. Kolton is a creative visionary leader with a demonstrated history of working in the performing arts industry. He's a strong arts and curriculum design professional and a multidisciplinary artist, musician, performer, writer, actor, director, who pushes the boundaries of creative and seeks to innovate the methods of performing arts. His work centers on diversifying representation within arts-based industries and demonstrating the power of the arts to heal, transform, and flourish humanity. So welcome, Adriane and Kolton. Thank you so much for joining. We're so excited to introduce the community to you and vice versa. I'm going to pass it right to you, and then we'll open it up for questions. This time is really meant to gather as an interactive basis. So we want to hear from you if you choose so. So Adriane, thank you again for joining us, and welcome. Kolton.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having us. Many of whom we know and many of whom we don't know on here right now. I want to give a shout out to Lindy, who sits on the Cultural Affairs Commission for the Department of Cultural Affairs in the City of New Haven. Hi, Lindy, welcome, and thank you for being here.
I promise no loaded questions.
Thanks, Lindy. I appreciate that. No, we love it when you're in the space with us, Lindy. So we're very excited to be with you today, and I'm always happy to be joined by Kolton, who is very much like a brother to me, a close confidant and friend, and obviously a colleague in this work of arts administration and really just advancing cultural equity and advancing representation in arts and culture and beyond, right? The intersectionality of where arts meets other sectors in order to be more diverse, inclusive, and equitable. What we're going to do first, though, is we're going to start off with some questions for you all just to get to know you a little bit better. And then we're going to dive into some information about ourselves and what we're working on. And then we're going to have a conversation around equitable development and cultural equity and what that looks like and what that means. So with that said, I'm going to pass it on to Kolton, who is going to lead us through some questions.
Hey, what's up, everyone? So happy to be here. As Adrienne said, we're very close, not just in our work, but also in life. And I think that that's one of at least my goals from this short time that we have together, is that you think a little bit more holistically about not just how your work and life intersect, but also how industries and culture and arts are really at the heartbeat and center of everything that we do. So with that, I'd like you, if you're joining us here on Zoom, put it in the chat. If you're on Facebook, please put it in the comments. But the first question is, how do you identify yourself? And you can kind of think about that in a very open way. How do you identify yourself? When someone says, who are you? What comes to mind? So if you just want to put that in the chat, and we'll see kind of what answers we get. It's interesting to just see how we define ourselves. So the first question is, how do you identify yourself in general? What's your marker or your markers if you're multi-hyphenate or whatever that looks like, right? So if you're able to throw that in the chat, and we'll read some of them out. And so sorry, I'm not on Facebook, so I can't see if you're writing on there. Don't worry, we don't discriminate.
I see these though, these are good already. Change maker, a creative, a citizen of the world, an arts leader, connector, sustainability professional, and urban advocate. Ooh, I have a couple that I'm curious if we can go into brief explanations about them, if we have a little time to do that, because I really want to know, and I'm not gonna put anybody on the spot, but if anyone wants to offer up a verbal explanation of why you call yourselves a sustainability professional and supporter, or a change maker, I'd be really curious to dive deep into some of these answers you're providing us with.
If you're on Zoom, yeah, feel free to use the raise your hand feature. Oh yeah, go right ahead, Paige.
Oh, Paige, if you're speaking, we can't hear you. I don't know if I'm the only one that can't hear you.
Yeah, I saw that you came off mute, but it may.
I feel like you were saying something so inspiring. I don't want to miss it. So
might have to defer to the chat. It looks like you're typing away. Okay, cool. Well, while you're figuring that out, anyone else want to share? And it's fine if not.
If you don't.
Okay,
I can keep reading them. Active thinker, reason driver, inspirer. I identify myself as a creative who loves to uplift others. Conscious leader, boat builder, and designer.
That's beautiful. Awesome. Cool. So then the second question before we dive in, and I feel like our time together is going to be so fun, but it's going to fly by. So if you could just help us out by putting in the chat, what's something that you hope to get out of our time together today? Because we all have expectations, and sometimes it's better to just know what is the expectation before we completely dive in, so that we can create and build together, and this experience can really be tailored and designed around what you all are expecting. So if you just don't mind putting in the chat, what's something that you were anticipating maybe before you came, or now that you're settling in and you're hearing a little bit about us, what are you hoping to get from our time together? Why'd you show up? And Adrienne, you have a beautiful reading voice, so if you want to read out the responses.
Okay, I will read more. Seeing light bulbs go off among my colleagues here on the overlap between economic and cultural development. I believe Eleanor said that. Glenn said community building through visual arts. And again, the question was, what are you looking to get out of, our brief time together today? What are you hoping to take away? A new understanding, perspective, connecting with individuals driven to make a difference in the world. Learn about local resources in Connecticut and change makers. As an arts administrator, I love the collaboration of people and ideas between the arts world and the conscious capitalists. Let's strengthen those ties. Yes, let's.
I think what I want to hear, because I'm not such a fast typist, is really, I think there are so many definitions of what diversity, equity, and inclusion means, and so many individual definitions. I'd like to hear what it means to each of you.
That's really great.
That's good. Yeah.
I'd like to change my answer to Lindy Lee's right now.
You can have more than one answer. We're really talking about disrupting culture, and that first means like disrupting boxes. So you don't have to limit yourself. So both of your answers, all right? And you want to read this last one from Paige, and then we'll dive in.
Yeah, I was actually just reading it like, whoa, this really was super profound. Being a connector, I believe we are all made up of points of light, people, and experiences. Those points of light lead us in our journey and start creating our personal constellations. I love to connect people, bringing together our points of light in our collective universe. That's beautiful and very well said.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing that. So thank you to everyone for sharing, and feel free, keep the chat alive, put your questions, your thoughts, anything that sticks out to you, and we're just going to dive in. So I guess with that, Adriane, I'm going to kick it over to you, and we can start wherever you want to start, and we'll talk, and we'll just continue to engage and build. And yeah, I'm excited about where we're going to go.
Yeah, so I was thinking we would talk a little bit about ourselves and what has brought us to this point in the type of work that we do. And also kind of just briefly touch upon some of the work that we are doing that is cultural equity work, that is arts for anti-racism work, that is intersectionality work with advancing justice and equity. So for me, I was actually on a call. I had this mentor call the other day. I have a few people that I mentor, and someone was asking me like, how did you get started and how did you start doing the work that you do? And I realized how important that message is in like where I started and to where I am now, and to how it connects with why I am so passionate about cultural equity and justice, because it is my lived experience, right? So like I started off as a writer when I was in elementary school. And I always knew I had like this knack for writing. I knew that that was gonna kind of like be my thing. And I begged my parents to go to an arts and culture middle school, which is now known as the Isaac School in New London, Connecticut. So I was a part of this guinea pig group to a school that never existed before. Got into this kind of arts, performing arts school, and really expanded my depth from writing into like performing arts, into songwriting and writing scripts. And then from there, ended up in high school, ending up in a program that's now called the Writer's Block, which was really about working with younger people, especially young people that were troubled young people, to use the power of the pen to activate social change and social justice. Now, during that time, I had a lot of things that happened, a lot of tragedy. I lost my brother. My brother died when I was 13 years old. And I fell into a very deep depression. And so my high school years were rough. And I wasn't really living up to where I needed to live up to academically, even though I was very capable. And the only thing that saved my life, and I truly believe this to this day, is arts and culture. It is the only thing that brought me back up academically. It's the only reason why I ended up going off to college. I went to undergrad, Miami, Florida Memorial University. And there is where I really began to have a foundation of what it meant to be immersed in arts and culture. And so like my first few jobs were in the entertainment industry, working in film and production. And I quickly decided that I didn't want to just be in arts and entertainment, but that I really wanted to make an impact, and that it was really about change and social justice and community and centering people. And so that's when I started to work for nonprofit organizations and got introduced to this world of arts administration and creative direction and working in and with community. And that is really where I found transformation in myself, and also found purpose in making sure that we are using the arts to navigate change, to navigate truth, to reconcile with our past. And so, so I speed it up, right? So that's kind of like the story. And I worked at Writer's Block, and then I worked at the Office of the Arts, where Kolton is now. And now I'm in my current job as the Director of Cultural Affairs for the city. And my focus is very much about everything that I just said, right? So we've been working on the Arts for Anti-Racism Pledge, looking at ways to hold arts organizations and ourselves accountable for how we are working with people in the community, how we are centering Black and Brown people, how we are bringing opportunities and bridging gaps where there are gaps, historically gaps for people who are marginalized and primarily Black and Brown people. We have been working on the cultural equity plan for the city, which is now in its completed form and going to be going through an approval process through the Cultural Affairs Commission, shout out to Lindy, and the Board of Alders, right? So we're working on that. And that plan is all encompassing of cultural equity in every pocket and division of the city of New Haven, making sure that no one is without access to arts and culture, right? So we're working on that. We have been looking at our funding and looking at how we are equitably distributing funds to people who usually don't even know that these funds exist because they're not getting that information. So looking at bridging the gaps to equitable access to information so that people have the resources that they need. So yeah, this is the work that we're doing and we're immersed in it. And that's why I'm glad to be talking to you today about what cultural equity looks like and how it intersects with the business community. And with that said, I'm going to just pass it on to Kolton so that he has a chance to talk about his journey and the work that he's doing.
Yeah, no matter how many times I hear it, it's always wonderful to hear your story. And Adriane and I's story parallel and intersect actually a lot, even before this moment. So a little bit about me, my investment in arts and creativity and design from a holistic perspective comes from a series of events throughout my life in which I saw the arts marginalized in our educational system as a student, in which I was always involved and engaged in artistic activities, but they were pass fail versus letter grades. And so they weren't of as much value and worth. And oftentimes as punishment for not doing well in certain other subjects areas, I was pulled from artistic activities. But also while I was in those artistic activities, I was experiencing a lot of direct racism, whether through microaggressions or just outright discrimination, albeit auditioning for a show in college or in high school for theater and being told to my face that my presence as a Black person in the show and given the character that I was auditioning for would disrupt the audience's experience, right? So these were explicit things that were said to me that, oh, we can actually cast you in a different role, or this person can't be Black, or, and so then I started experiencing more and more marginalization in that way. And I was raised in an environment and a household to think globally and to think about the world and to think about other people around me. So I was always conscious that if I was experiencing these barriers, if I was experiencing these pushbacks, that other people were as well. And I didn't want it to hinder my love for the arts. And then the other part of my story was that once I really started, initially as a child, my investment in the arts first came from, I'd tell folks, running around in my underwear with a shirt on my head, being Tarzan in my household. Don't worry, I wasn't like 15 or anything like that. I was all a child, right? So this adult, he said he was running around in his underwear. No, I wasn't doing that. But that I was, my mother can tell the story better than me, but I would rewind the movies to the beginning, and each time would be a different character, the whole movie, watch it through. And if I messed up a line, I would rewind it and start from the beginning because I had to do it perfectly. And growing up in church and playing music and just being in love with the arts, but seeing that they had so much more value than what was being prescribed, right? A quote that is by a so-called anonymous source was basically says, and it's something that I think about often, but the writer said, give me the songs of a nation, I don't care who writes its laws, right? This idea that the art of a people, of a culture, really resonates more and sometimes guides policies and guides how they govern themselves, because our real cultural governance comes from the art that we engage in. So with that, I continued to love what I was doing, but felt like it was not valued by not so much peers, but adults in my life, right? Being a young person, except when I was at the organization that Adriane referred to, Writer's Block, right? As a young person, being able to be a part of the program in which we were making art that mattered. And outside of that experience, I was constantly being told by peers, parents, and friends, and moms say, "Oh, that's really great. You did great at the concert, but what are you really going to do in life?" Or like, "What are you really going to do? That stuff's just a hobby." And I felt in my heart, I was like, no, I'm an artist and I want to make art and I want to do it, for my life. And after college, in a transitionary, point, I was about to go to grad school for all the wrong reasons. And I halted the process and I found myself volunteering and then eventually working at the organization Writer's Block that Adriane mentioned as well. So when she transitioned out, some time went by and then I ended up running and leading the organization. And then when she left the Office of the Arts, I went over there and, so it was just kind of the ways in which our paths sort of paralleled. But with that, my focus still continues to be a lot on youth because I'm really into intergenerational work. And I think that some of what we'll even talk about, and I'll probably allude to as we go deeper into the conversation, is that we need intergenerational work in an authentic way in which there's mutual listening, there's mutual creation and building together. But I personally keep myself really anchored and rooted in youth culture. And that's because I want to live for as long as possible. And I think people get old when they start just hanging around old thinking, right? And not so much in age, but in mentality. And so how do we stay fresh? And I think that the arts help us do that, right? The practice of making. But this then evolved into a larger sort of experience for me, in which after my senior year of college, I did my honors thesis on Black masculinity and superhero narratives. So I studied comic books for a year. And during that time, it was just an excuse to watch. I mean, they gave me a degree, so that works. But in that, thinking about critical race theory, thinking about narratives and stories, it continued to remind me that I saw in the chat that we have someone who says I'm a boat builder and designer. It started to make me think about the ways in which design, art, are not just a part of what we do. It's actually at the core, because human beings are creators at the core. And so a lot of my work centers on advocating for the humanness of creativity and how we need to create. So whether you're designing a building, you have to be really intentional and holistic about your design, whether you're making a piece of visual art or writing theater or making film, or even working in mathematics, right? It's not just a bunch, there's some creativity when you're researching. And so that's really at the core. So I'll stop there, but just to say that that's kind of like the way that my work evolved. And now, I'm working at the Office of the Arts, and we're trying to continue to build and create and make space and opportunity for other visionaries and other minds to create and to expand, and still making art constantly and thinking about how that shapes our world. So that's kind of where the vantage point I'm coming from.
And Kolton is right. Our paths have intersected many times, and it does feel like when I leave, he goes into the role, but he, in so many ways, creates his own path and is creating so many opportunities at the Office of the Arts for young people, for Black and Brown people, and sustainable opportunities, which is really, really important. He and I were in a conversation about this yesterday. It's one thing to create programs that are going to be representative of Black and Brown people, which is great. But what we want to see is sustainability in jobs and in workforce and in arts and culture, whatever it is they desire to be in. And that's really where the transformation and the change is made. So what we're going to do quickly, and it's so crazy, I'm like, it's already almost 3:30, what's happening? So we're going to go through just a series of questions, some stuff that he and I are going to be in dialogue about very briefly, and then we're going to open it up to the group to get your perspective, your insights, your expertise, or any questions that you may have as we go through these questions. The first thing I wanted to do, first of all, Policy Link is a great reference for you all. So I highly recommend that policylink.org, that you write down that reference, because I am going to be referencing a few things and guidance that have come out of Policy Link. So Policy Link, they put together this really amazing study that I'm going to pull up. And the study is called Creating Change Through Arts, Culture, and Equitable Development, a Policy and Practice Primer. And in their opening statement in that document, they said this. They said, arts and culture are essential for building community, supporting development, nurturing health and well-being, and contributing to economic opportunity. Collectively, arts and culture enable understanding of the past and envisioning of a shared, more equitable future. In disinvested communities, arts and culture acts as a tool for community development, shaping infrastructure, transportation, access to healthy food, and other core amenities. In communities of color and low-income communities, arts and culture contribute to strengthening cultural identity, healing trauma, and fostering shared vision for community. And I wanted to share that because the first question that I'm going to kind of just throw out, and I'll ask Kolton to lead this, because Kolton is always talking about, well, I think I talk about radical change, and his word is usually disrupting culture. And so I think that this description I just read is the premise of how you disrupt culture and how you start to look at arts different than just as like arts for art's sake, when arts is really not just nice, it is absolutely necessary. So Kolton, can you talk a little bit about disrupting culture, what that looks like and what that means through the lens of the arts?
Yeah, for sure. I think, for the first thing is that when people hear words like disruption, it can kind of cause them to tense up because you associate it sometimes with like a negative connotation. But we're talking about purposeful disruption. And if you've ever in your own personal life can think about times and moments where maybe a routine wasn't working for you, or you're trying to like stay consistent at the gym and you've been kind of in this weird role of not being able to be consistent, you got to kind of disrupt and shake up what you're doing or where you place things, right? And so that's really more the angle that we're coming from, of thinking about it for a reason, and that vision precedes the disruption. So there has to be a vision of what this shared future looks like. What does our environment look like? What are our goals? And then how do we disrupt? And practically what that looks like is really taking the time, whatever industry you're in, to take a moment to be a student. And of course, being a student and learning is a lifetime experience. But when we're talking about disrupting culture, it's about first having an analytical eye to think about what are some of the norms, the ways of doing things, the reasons for doing things, right? So when we think about our why, like why do we design boats, or why do we build this way, or why do we store the money in this spot, like thinking about the why, and then thinking about the processes of the how, and dissecting those processes to see how are these processes or these reasons, are they hindering efficiency, growth, but also equity and inclusion. And this is more of like the scientific part, I think, of disrupting culture, is that it's a little bit more strategic than just like, hey, we're just going to change things around, which I think a lot of folks, especially in 2020, when we started talking more about racism and systemic racism, everyone just started saying, well, we're just going to change a bunch of things, but they had no clue as to why they were moving the room around. And then you start seeing that there's no real tangible results. So I think that it's about pausing to say and understand how certain ways of doing things actually hinder folks, which I think a lot of Adriane's work and the things that I'm sure you can talk about, whether it's projects like murals, or it's like getting an equity plan and thinking about that with organizations. So I'll kick it over to you to just say, from like that vantage point, what are some things that you've seen, kind of in that space and in that sector?
Well, yeah. So first of all, I echo that we did see, we all saw what happened with George Floyd. We literally saw someone get murdered unjustly, but right in front of our faces. And in addition to that, this was also during the time of Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and the countless other Black and brown bodies who never make the news, right? And so we saw the George Floyd situation, and it was a wake-up call to many people. And to some, it wasn't new. It was nothing new. It was just like, oh, now people just know about it, right? And so I think what it did is it set a fire in a lot of people and had people wanting to do something about it, And so what we saw was release of solidarity statements from arts organizations and businesses of every sector, and everybody speaking out about it. But after that, there was no action plan for accountability and for what the steps would be to make sure that we are holding ourselves accountable to being able to dismantle the systems that allowed that to happen in the first place. And so a lot of the work that we've been focusing on is through this lens, right? It's one thing to have a solidarity statement, it's another to always have an action plan. And the way you get an action plan is through learning, is through training, is through educating yourself, self-education. I always say Google is your best friend, because right now everything is at your fingertips that you want to learn. And also having affinity groups that allow you to learn and to grow more. Now, something else that Kolton said that I just wanted to highlight is it's really behind the why, right? It's kind of like, it's really important to reconcile with our history. We have to do that. We have to understand what it is we are exactly talking about when we are talking about unjust systems. And it's also important to know that these systems show up in every single sector, regardless of if it's the arts or the business sector or the health sector. They are systems that are there, that have been created since 1619, when the first slave boat came over here. And so it is very important for us to understand the ramifications and implications of slavery to Reconstruction era, to Jim Crow, and ongoing, right? And so when we are talking about cultural equity and the work that needs to be done, we also are talking about reconciling with our history. And I just want to put that out there, that that's very important when we're talking about disrupting culture, and when we're talking about radical change. In my opinion, a lot of the things that we're doing are actually not that radical. Like, they're not that radical. They're just right. They're the right thing to do. It's the just thing to do. In government, I do think some of the things that we're doing could be considered radical, because it's usually not done in government. Government is designed with red tape. It's designed to not allow us to be able to really do things in an equitable way. And so we have to think of creative ways to undo those systems and those policies. So I saw a question in the chat.
Yeah, I was gonna dive in, because I wanted to tie into what you said and then answer that question. Okay. I think a phrase that I would love to give folks, if you want to take with you, is that in addition to what Adriane is saying, when you're thinking about reconciling and thinking about history, we're also talking about the adopted why. And what I mean by the adopted why is that many of us come into systems, into organizations, into institutions and businesses that function a certain way, and we didn't create the why, or even sometimes the how, the processes. They've been adopted over time, and no one ever takes the time to pause to question them, right? So as a practical example, I'm really big on thinking about restructuring education a lot, because I think that that's where it starts. And that'll be a part of my message to you all, is like, you have to focus on the youth. Because they're not the future, they're the now. But simple things like asking the question, why do teachers refer to students by their first name, but students refer to the teacher as Mr. or Miss so-and-so with the last name? It's just something we always do. But when do we pause to ask, like, okay, why does this happen? And when you root the why to, oh, it's because it's a matter of respect or of hierarchy or of differentiation, then you can sort of make a radical switch, right? So I can tell you, I was a substitute teacher and an educator in schools, but also running a youth organization, that I received more human, authentic respect from the students I worked with than some of their teachers, whom they had to call a certain name. Because the teacher, though they had a title and there was this distinction in this hierarchy, it actually birthed this tension between students as well as teachers that wasn't present in our relationship, right? So am I, then advocating that everyone, you can do whatever you want. But my point is that these are some practical things that you do, of like, well, why do we do this? What's the purpose of it? And then you can kind of disrupt it. So I disrupted culture in my space by saying, you can call me by my name, and I don't fear you disrespecting me, because we're both humans. And if I honor you and I love you and it's mutual, we can have that common ground, right? In the same way that we think about our justice system and talking about the different types of, sort of punishment, like restorative justice practices versus like punitive things. So I just wanted to put that out there, because we were made to evolve our methodology. So you in your sector and in your organizations, wherever you are, constantly think about evolving the ways that you do things and the ways that you do them as you dissect them. And real quick, Paul, to your question, how do you differentiate between equity and opportunity? I would say that equity is really talking more about the fairness, and opportunity is really, they intersect in the sense that you can have opportunities that are not equitable, right? There's all of that all the time, right? So yeah, everyone had the opportunity to fill out the application, and it's like, well, it wasn't posted in my neighborhood. So like the opportunity wasn't equitable versus in other sort of spaces. So yeah, the opportunity, yeah. And this image, which I think folks.
My favorite cartoon, Adrian.
There you go.
This is just a good example.
It saves a lot of words.
Yeah, it says a lot of words. And they have one that gives a third image in which they knock down the fence entirely, which I was like, yeah, I'm about that too.
I can't find that one. Yeah, that one's the best. Let's just knock down the fence and get back.
I just want to chirp in with one thing, because it is very common in our society right now to try to marginalize the arts altogether.
Mm-hmm.
And all you hear from people is STEM, 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 you know, science, technology, engineering, math, without STEAM, putting the arts in the middle of that and recognizing and applauding the critical thinking, the problem solving, the arts, the creativity of it. And so my ask for you to have a takeaway is really to think about in your own systems and in talking about your own educational and business communities to really talk about STEAM and not STEM.
Lindy, I love that you brought that up because it is a perfect segue to just remind people, or maybe people don't even know this, that the arts is a $1 billion industry. It's actually billions of a dollar industry nationwide. But in Connecticut, we're almost a $1 billion industry. We actually bring in more money than some more front-facing industries. And a lot of people don't know that. So like the fact that arts not only is transformative for our children, like Lindy was saying, from it's STEAM, not STEM, right? But not just that, it also is an economic driver. It brings literally thousands and millions of dollars into our economy, which is why we say it is not just nice, it is absolutely necessary. It also drives tourism, which then drives our economy, right? And it also is the conduit and the answer to vibrant communities and neighborhoods and cultural connectivity. And so it is just so important and fundamental on so many levels. Thank you, Lindy, for saying that so that we could just make that point. I do
want to say something to Kolton in terms of his discussion of the disruption of these titles. At Yale University, the head of each college at Yale used to be referred to as master. And the particular college at Yale with which I'm involved has a really thoughtful, terrific head of college. And he challenged the university to drop that designation, master, because it really harkened back to slavery and all the horrible things that Yale would much rather eradicate from their history than celebrate with those kinds of terms. So it went through a lot of debate, a lot of nostalgia, I guess, on the part of some of these people who have come in and out of that role of head of college, but he in fact prevailed. So even the oldest institutions can benefit from such disruption.
Absolutely. And I think some of that goes to what I've seen, the work that Adriane does, even, and what I try to center everything that I'm doing is that when you feel the disruption, the impulse is to cling tight onto everything familiar and what you think is necessary. You think it's going to help you maintain power, but constantly, again, I see, even through the work that Adriane's doing now, but always been a part of the fabric of her work, is about surrendering power in order to empower others. And when you do that, though, you actually realize that you actually are empowered that much more. And when you include the folks that you're working for with in conversations, in processes, it actually empowers, and it's really all about relationship building and trust. And I think that's why the arts have to lead the way, because the arts are inherently human. and all of our other industries and institutions, when we get so caught up in the economic parts and we put profit over people, we continue to dehumanize ourselves. So we have to humanize our work. Like, that's why I'm so grateful that we're talking a lot more about mental health, because it's really absurd to think that for years, and I know some of y'all here who are older than me, experience corporate work culture in which
Kolton, everybody is older than you.
let's pretend. Come on. I'm approaching 55, but like, it's like, it's like, but you've been in environments where you weren't allowed to bring yourself to work. You weren't allowed to, express feeling or thought, or to just pause, but everything's just about like machine type work, and then very industrial model. And that's one thing I think about American culture in general, is that we're constantly wrestling, because I think as our hearts as humans is we want to continue to be evolving, but I definitely feel like we have an industrial model of thinking about everything, because it's outdated.
Can I piggyback off of something you just said regarding community and working with community and centering community and giving shared power? A lot of times, first of all, we all have to see ourselves as gatekeepers, because we're gatekeepers, and gatekeeping doesn't always have to be a bad thing, right? Gatekeeping means that you can make a decision to be a leader that empowers people and that shares that power. And at every moment, finding a chance in the work you're doing to be a gatekeeper that is an equitable gatekeeper that's going to open the gate and not close the gate. And so we at every moment have a chance to check ourselves and to make sure that we are doing just that. And so as people who are leaders and gatekeepers in the community, working with the community, I think first of all, it's important to work with them and not for them, and not telling them what to do, but with, right? It's a different dynamic. And then also, I believe that we have to go into the community without an agenda. A lot of times we come in because we want to build this public art mural there, or we want to build this development there, or we want to do whatever. It's our own agenda, instead of understanding the community and what's already there, the culture that's already happening, the platform we can already give these cultures that exist. And so a key part of developing really good relationship with community is by immersing yourself in the culture that's already there, instead of coming in a mindset that we're going to make it better, right? Or that we're going to do place making and put arts in a place maybe they don't even want it. And so it's very important to have and to really begin to understand the way your work intersects with community. But when you have the opportunity to intersect with community, the how you do it is what really, really matters. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Now I know go ahead.
Just real quick, I just want to do a quick shout out. Lori's on the call. Just want to uplift this because I think it's a really beautiful example. So Lori Robichaud, who's over at La Grua Art Center, reached out to me, her and her program director reached out to me some time ago with this idea that they want to start incorporating a community curator, right? And that idea is that they empower someone in the community to select an artist or a work of or work that they want in the space, and they're going to be like a full sort of exhibit for a length of time. I'm struck by the way Lori sort of brought that, and I think sort of like practical steps and things that you do when you empower someone. You give them the reins, or you give them the space to do what they want to do. And sometimes when we're holding on to power, we want to say, okay, yeah, you can come in, but this is how you're going to come in, versus saying like, no, we want you here, and also you want to be here, and then also kind of get free. So Lori, just wanted to shout you out.
Thank you, Kolton. We're really looking forward to having this with you and Rashane, the artist you've selected to be in our gallery.
So before we go on to the next topic, which I just want to acknowledge we're at 3:47. So I wanted to see and take a moment to stop to see if there's any questions anyone has, comments that anyone has, or anything that's just, burning in your heart, and that you're like, I have to say it now. I just want to give the opportunity and some space for anyone to chime in who hasn't had a chance to speak.
I'd love to chime in really quick, although I don't feel deprived of having the opportunity to speak. But I do want to share this, that some of the things you guys have talked about, I actually wrote down. It made quite an impact, because quite often I'll say the youth is our future. but Colton, it really struck me so deeply when you said the youth is not our future, they are the now. And it's just, so thank you for that gift, because that's a huge takeaway that really reminds me of living in the present and living in the now. And one of the things that, first of all, both of your energies is just contagious, and we can feel your passion just coming right through the screen. At least I can. It's just amazing. And it reminded me of, and I quoted last month too, a quote from The Hero's Journey from Joseph Campbell. I'm going to read this quote. I'm going to read it so I don't mess it up. But the journey of the hero is about the courage to seek the depths, the image to create rebirth, the external cycle to change within us, the uncanny discovery that the seeker is the mystery which the seeker seeks to know. And when you brought us into your world, you started with your journey. And that's really where the start is, right? It is the journey of the hero's journey. So thank you. And for you guys knowing that of yourselves and really understanding your journey, I think has helped you expand and helped the community and helped us as well as a community get to know your mission a little more and a little deeper. But thank you for having the courage to go deep with yourselves, because we can see you've done some beautiful work for yourself. So anyway, I had to share that. I could not help myself. I had to chime in. But
that was awesome. Can you put that quote in the chat, or at least where we can find that?
I sure can. I'll start typing. Absolutely.
I got to tell you, Hero's Journey was like a major work that I studied for my thesis. So yeah, beautiful stuff.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, thank you for being a shining example of it. So yeah.
I would say one thing, Adrienne, that some of our young Black and Brown leaders like yourselves come to the place where they are from the tragedies that have happened and the violence that's happened in their lives. And I would point to locally Eric Clemens, who also lost a brother. And it happens more often in those communities without people. Not only does it happen more often, but the vehicles that are available to deal with the loss and the tragedy and the violence have really not been as abundant in those communities as they have with others. And so I think, from the depths of pain can come great creativity to cope. And, all I can say, Kolton, is when Adrienne leaves us and goes national, you'll be next in line.
Well, yeah, listen, I don't think I'll be trying to fill those shoes, but her and I may be going national at the same time.
At the same time.
Oh.
Yeah. So, I think, thank you both for saying those things. And I know we're getting close to the end of our time. I guess I just wanted to throw in there like two things. One, connected to my statement around the youth is the now, and also thinking about, Lindy, your comments around trauma. I think that folks on this call have an opportunity, and I think we all do, to engage with young people, so that, because trauma is not the only way or the only pathway. So I think of myself as an not just a disruptor, but an interceptor, and disrupting in other ways. And some practical things that I always like to just share to folks. It sounds radical, I think, in the professional context, but as Adrienne said, it's just the right thing to do. I think we need to start valuing friendships and thinking about how to build relationships and true friendships with folks that we want to, quote unquote, serve. When you're trying to do it inauthentically, it's really harmful. Like, I talk a lot about youth and young people. I don't consider myself a youth worker. I actually have, there are young people that are my friends. And when I say they're my friends, they give me music to listen to. We share stories and things back and forth, right? And through that, when I'm speaking and I'm learning, it's because I'm speaking about folks that I'm actually connected to, versus oh, I live in this neighborhood and I really want to help the people in the hood over there where they really need a mural. It's no, it's actually, come on, let's build friendship. And the last thing I'll offer in the space is two principles I live my life by that I always talk about, but I like to refresh it for other folks. is that I think that our lives would do better if we focus on innovation. How are we making things better? But then also alleviation. Can we remove or help where there is suffering? So innovation and alleviation are two guiding principles as an artist for me, but also as a arts administrator. And I think all of us can carry that in our work. You can always be busy if you're thinking about how to improve things, but then also when you open your eyes to where are there suffering people or where is there harm being done, and how can I then alleviate that? So I just wanted to offer that. So Adriane, back to you.
No, Kolton, that's great, because it really makes me think about how important intergenerational relationships are. A lot of the divide, and I saw this because I was leading a racial equity meeting earlier with people who are very different backgrounds, generations. And the one thing that struck me was less the racial divide and more the generational divide, and how we can learn from each other on both ends. So if you look at who are the revolutionaries, and people of all ages are revolutionaries, so let me preference it with that. But if you look at the protest that happened, a couple of summers ago, when what happened with George Floyd happened, and we look at the civil rights movement, many of these movements and these revolutionary movements and protests are led by young people. So this is like nothing new. I think now with social media, this generation has social media at their fingertips to be able to demonstrate just how immersed young people are in the revolutionary movement. Now, older people have the wisdom, they have the knowledge and the history that we as younger people need to lean upon. And there's so much that can be learned if we just connect with each other. And I don't think that happens enough. And I think we need to do that way more. And then when you add race into the situation, now you see why all of these problems kind of develop. But we're really looking at two different issues. We're looking at racism, and we're looking at the generational divide, in which we need to start to bridge a major gap. So I just wanted to say that, because what you were talking about, Kolton, kind of sparked that inside of me. Now, I know we were at like 5 minutes. This flew by. We literally didn't get to like anything else that we were going to talk about. But I think we should just keep going to see if anybody else has anything to say, or comments or questions or anything coming up for you.
And I want to make sure we know how to get a hold of you or in touch with you. What's the best way in the event someone has questions or comments, or wants to connect you with someone in their network as well?
I'll put my contact list.
Yeah, me too. I'm going to do that now. Now, one other thing I want, and we don't have enough time to talk about it, but I do want to bring it up because I think it's very relevant to this group, is looking at equitable development and where the arts intersects with that. So if you look at and you think about cultural districts, for example, when you think about arts and culture, a lot of times people are trying to create cultural districts in neighborhoods. And what happens is gentrification soon follows. And so how do we develop equitable developments that drive tourism, that bring economic dollars, and that also keep community where they are and uplift community? And so I would challenge us all to think about ways we can be immersed in equitable development, cultural districts that are equitable, and on all types of developments that are happening that center community. A lot of times the community are not brought in at foundational levels when developments are happening, and they should be, and they need to be. It can't be after the fact. And so I just wanted to put that out there, as maybe we can come back and talk about it some more. But I think for this group, it could be very relevant.
Great. Well, we are 3 minutes to the top of the hour. And I always say this is not the end. This is just the beginning of hopefully many conversations that we're having with you. I want to thank you personally, and I know on behalf of all the board, thank you so much for coming on, Adriane and Kolton. Thank you for having the courage to speak your truth and to live your purpose here. And I am looking forward to kind of watching you guys grow and see what good things you have cooking up. If there's anything that we can do to support you in the next couple minutes, I'd love to hear, how can we as a board support you in Connecticut Arts and the mission? How can we help?
Kolton, you want to go?
Send me
Oh, it's a huge smile, Kolton. I know you got the answer. It's beautiful.
I believe in I like having fun in the midst of everything. So I was thinking of funny things to say, but I think that ways to support, as I said, I work at the Office of the Arts, but I'm also an artist. Back on Juneteenth, I released a short music film. So I'm going to put it in the chat so you can help me by watching it and sharing it so we can get it to more people, as well as like some other sort of music and art. And then I think staying in touch and just let's continue to build community and lean on one another and try to strive forward. So I'll put that in the chat. That's like my more immediate thing. And then, yeah, as other stuff comes up, I'll let you know.
Kolton is a very, very talented performer, creative artist. So yes, please support all of his work. For me, honestly, the best way you can support any of the work that I'm doing or that my colleagues are doing is to self-educate, continue to educate yourself and continue to dive into the work and center this work in what you're doing. That would be helpful to me because what we're developing here is a movement, it's revolutionary act, revolutionary change. And it's more, it takes more than one person or a group of people. It takes us all to really do this work.
Oh, Adriane, Kolton, thank you so much. Really, it's been such a pleasure getting to know all of you. Well, thank you all for joining. We know that you have a lot of choices with this Zoom world, and especially with the heat. So thank you so much for joining today's Youth Mentor Series. And stay tuned, Glenn. I'm sorry, I don't know off the top of my head, or Allie, when is our next gathering?
Actually, next week we have Laura Wengen going to talk about the sustainability role within corporations. So that'll be a different kind of conversation. But thank you so much, Kolton and Adriane, today. I've really enjoyed your stories, and I'm very much a fan of what you guys are doing, and very grateful that you're doing it. So.
Thank you so much. Thank you all. Thank you, Allie. Thank you, Glenn. Bye, Lindy. Bye, Gavin.
Bye, guys.